If you're redesigning your garden, or even if you're just buying a bit of extra furniture or perhaps some plants, there are three things that you actually find influence that choice a great deal, and that may be unconscious or it may be calculated. It's Alexandra here from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog. So I'm here being blown around in the sunny seaside town of Margate to look at a garden that really encapsulates and uses those three factors really well. There are timestamps in the description below, so you can go to any particular part of the video you'd like to look at again, along with some plant names. And if you're new here, the Middlesized Garden uploads weekly with tips, ideas and inspiration for your garden. And if you'd like to see the videos when you open up YouTube, click the subscribe button, they're free. And if you'd like YouTube to tell you when a new video is uploaded, tap the notifications bell. The first thing, of course, is where you live. The town, the city, the environment. If your garden is on a windy, sunny hillside, it's going to be very different from a garden that's in a town surrounded by houses, very shady but very sheltered. But it's also about that lovely church that overlooks the garden, a neighbour's tree, anything in your environment that could influence your design. Secondly, it's the architecture of your house. Now, some people will really think about that. They'll pick up the bricks in the paths, they'll look at the design principles, and others will say, actually, I don't really care about the architecture of my house. I want my garden to contrast like a townhouse with a cottage garden. And either is fine, but either way, the architecture of your house is influencing your decision. And then, of course, the third factor is you, your past, what you love. I saw a garden this week which had a border full of plants that had been propagated from the owner's late grandmother's garden. So it's your past and what you like. And this garden, quite a small, shady town garden in Margate, really encapsulates those three elements: the environment of the town, the history of the house, and also the person who owns it, Mark Walker, and his own individual likes and history.
I read an article about the changes that were happening in Margate and all the regeneration that was happening, and a lot of artists moving down here from London. And I saw that there was a lot of very interesting property, a lot of very historic character, I suppose we'd call it, property, and came down. I didn't know Margate well at all. Came down and had a look.
Margate was a quiet fishing village until 1730, when the fashion for sea bathing brought visitors from London and far away, and it became Britain's first seaside resort, and very fashionable with wonderful Georgian and Victorian houses. But in the 1960s and 70s, package holidays arrived and people no longer wanted to holiday in Britain. And like so many seaside towns, Margate fell into poverty and dilapidation. For the last couple of decades, there's been a regeneration programme. For example, the Turner Contemporary Art Gallery has been built on the beach, and Dreamland, which was one of Britain's earliest amusement parks, has been restored and is now a vintage amusement park. The artists have always loved the light of Margate. Turner painted here, T.S. Eliot loved it, but the artists have now returned as part of the regeneration. But of course, Margate's problems are not over. And so Margate, very much New Margate, Old Margate, and very, very old Margate sit side by side.
Well, the house was a big mess. One of the nice things when we came to view it was that the old lady who lived here at the time was a very passionate gardener. And although most of the house, as we were talking earlier, most of the house was covered in outbuildings and so on, the bits of garden that she did have, she really loved and really looked after. So there was all this established greenery, and you felt it always felt quite a nice secluded, even though it's in a terrace in the middle of a place of lots of housing. It always had a very nice sort of almost secret garden feel to it. It always felt very sort of secret and enclosed in a way, and that really summed up the feeling of the house. You did sort of step in, and once you stepped over the front door and you could see straight through to the garden, you sort of had this sort of slight feeling of stepping into another world from the street. At the time, there were quite a few problems in the street with litter and so on, but you stepped into this sort of oasis, if you like, and it really did feel like another world. And from there, I suppose everything just grew from there. So when we bought the house, there was a very large room which extended right the way to almost to where that palm tree is. It extended into the garden a long way. And it was the remnants of the original Edwardian, probably, conservatory. but it had a lot of repairs to it over the years. Very little of the original structure remained. So we took the conservatory down, and when they demolished it, or most of it, they discovered underneath the floor of what we thought was a conservatory that was pretty much at the same time as the house, there was clearly an older conservatory floor underneath it, which you can see now. It gives us more space, but we didn't want everything to look terribly new. We wanted to retain this feeling of something that had a lot of age and a lot of texture to it. So when they pulled the conservatory down, there was a lot of debate about whether to repaint it, scrape it. And in the end, we decided just to leave it and let the elements sort of do their stuff. So even over the last few years, you're gradually seeing the colours fading, weathering, and becoming a little bit more muted, but still probably a little bit garish for some people's taste. But it is nice to, it doesn't all feel brand new and perfectly restored. There's still a lot of texture there, which is nice and adds to the feeling of the space. It does feel the right proportions for the rest of the house as well, to have this space of this size, and it does recreate a much better balance between the house and the garden, because if you take up all of that space as a building, what you're left with is obviously a much, much smaller garden. It just sort of reversed the proportions between the house and the garden. So on that side of the house, we were just talking earlier about it was quite a muddy sort of, it was the most undeveloped, underused part of the garden. And clearly, apart from a couple of hours in the morning, it also doesn't get a huge amount of sun. So it was quite dark, and it was just a lot of mud, not a lot of plants, things growing there. So again, we put some decking out there so you could step out from the kitchen, and that was a new door from the kitchen and another entrance to the garden. And I found an old, it was probably a Victorian railway bench or something in a warehouse antique shop around the corner from where we live. And I knew it would work somewhere. I didn't buy it originally for that spot. And then one day we just realized, actually, we need something on there. So we had a brilliant painter who did a lot of work on the house, and he took it away and scrubbed off layers of varnish and everything else, and painted it to the bench that you see now. And then behind the bench, above it, behind the plant, sometime in the 60s, and we've seen photos of this from the previous owner of the house, her husband painted a large mural of a big countryside scene, which from the photographs was, in 1960s paint, was quite garish and colourful, but over the years it's weathered, and now there's the sort of that grey, green, bluey textured wall that actually works very well now with the rest of the garden. People don't often realise it is actually the remnants of a mural. They just they can see something there, but nobody's quite sure what. And then when you point it out, you can actually see the lines of the fields and the hedges. The lady who lived here before was a very, very keen gardener. And so there was a lot of established, very nice, quite large plants in the garden. And we didn't want to lose that. That was all contributing to this feeling of enclosure and sort of mystery and so on. So we didn't want to lose any of that. Coincidentally, I was living in Singapore at the same time, and we had a number of gardeners that I approached for advice and ideas about the garden. And one of them, Simon, who eventually did do the garden for us, he came up with this idea of actually, Singapore is very, very lush. It's very green. It rains a lot, as it's raining today. You get that very intense, lush greenery. And that was sort of where the whole idea and theme came from. It wasn't, okay, let's go away and design a lush green garden. It was, okay, let's go with it and see where it takes us. And it was added to and shifted around, and we added little bits of structure here. We put the paths in, for example, but it wasn't, come in for a week, do it all, and then step back. It was all done. It's all evolved over the last few years, which I think, again, gives it a very nice feeling rather than being too designed and too manicured. It feels very much like it's evolved.
My name's Simon, Middlesized Gardens. The house has just been renovated over about 4 years, I think, in the keeping with the original features. So I kind of wanted to find within the garden what was still there and keep that, and then create some kind of layout with that in mind. So we basically dug out lots of old concrete slabs, and underneath them we found another older patio. Actually, there was soil, one patio, then soil, then another patio, and after we cleared that, we found it kind of led to this kind of keyhole design, which is quite nice. You go down like a small path and then you enter a new area. It's kind of like a little journey within a garden, even though it's a very small space. Very much like you don't design before, it's like a process. You kind of have an idea, then you kind of see what the garden makes you do based on its landscape and what plants and features are there, rather than strip everything back and start again.
And when you've kept quite a few of the mature trees and shrubs, did you do anything to them to renovate them?
No, I did very little. I think just prune things and bring some manure. There was some apple tree, pear tree, a couple of cordylines, quite big palm trees, and a couple of grapevines, some old roses in there already. So it had a nice kind of enclosed feel, like a mini forest in a back courtyard, so you can't see any houses around. It's a bit experimental because no one's really around to water every week because they're often away, the owners. So I tried stuff like ferns, but they seem to die because of the lack of water. So I had to go to stuff more like euphorbias and more silvery leafed plants. And I've put in a tetrapanax, which seems to have done really well. Has big leaves. Other things I know do well around here, like acanthus mollis, lots of lilies, and then in the corner there's these two sheds which I think were full of rubbish without a roof, and where the owners of the hotel used to live when their hotel was full of guests in the summer. But we just put a corrugated tin roof on it because it looks a bit tropical and it has a nice sound when it rains, and you can sit in there and look out through a rotten window frame and the garden kind of comes in. And that's the tropical thing as well. In the tropics, the gardens often come into the house, the courtyards are the outside, and there's wanted that to be a bit of a kind of crossover between the inside and out, with plants kind of overtaking the built environment.
If you'd like to know more about garden design and how that influences your garden, there's a Garden Design Ideas playlist at the end of this video. And if you'd like more tips, ideas and inspiration, then do subscribe to the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.